The world needs peace between the United States and China. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Robert E. Rubin, who served as U.S. Treasury Secretary from 1995 to 1999, published a message on the New York Times website on January 2 with a strong focus on why the United States and China should pay attention to it. The immediate economic interests turn to cooperation for the well-being of mankind. An atmosphere of friendly cooperation should be built. In the United States, the voice of support for cooperation with China is gradually disappearing. The frustrating thoughts I have heard about business trade issues from business leaders are increasing, and the military is worried that Beijing will take radical action on geopolitics. The remarkable voices of the two major political parties are becoming more and more belligerent, and the concerns of the legislature have become a vicious circle. Every negative progress will deepen the poison of goodwill, and this kind of goodwill is very crude. This cycle must be reversed. In the United States, business groups, policy analysts, and the media should create a good atmosphere that encourages the government to pursue friendship. This should be the case in China, even though the political system there is quite different. The leaders of the two countries should be aware of the direct benefits that can be brought about by jointly addressing global big issues, especially the two major threats to life on Earth, nuclear weapons and climate warming. No country can solve these threats on its own, and it turns out that the existing international institutions are also unable to do so. The most likely to solve these major problems and global problems like infectious diseases, terrorism, cybersecurity, etc., is that the world's two major economies have joined forces to catalyze global action. Building cooperation, facing the challenge of a global crisis. The best way to achieve the above vision is to build a constructive partnership. We must put our differences aside and face challenges. As the world's two largest economies, the United States and China can set the tone for climate change by investing in clean energy technologies, adopting stricter environmental regulations and encouraging trading partners to follow suit. Of course, this year the U.S. government does not accept the fact that climate warming, but the future government is expected to recognize the urgency of action. The two countries should also cooperate to deal with the proliferation and possible use of nuclear weapons. What is worrying is not only North Korea. The government's weak Pakistan's control over its nuclear arsenal is also very unstable. The tortuous development of human history is inseparable from conflict. As long as you believe that human nature is likely to change, it means that at some point in time, there is likely to be the possibility of using nuclear weapons in the name of the state or non-state. Cooperation between the United States and China can limit the danger of nuclear weapons spreading between countries and the transfer of nuclear materials to terrorists, which will make humans safer. The most promising approach to solving the above challenges is to bring economic cooperation between the two countries back on a stable track. This kind of cooperation needs to be determined by senior management. Therefore, President Trump and President Xi Jinping should put cooperation at the top of their framework for resolving trade disputes. Where are the wrong in the United States and China? In some cases, the U.S. government's resistance to China seems to be brought about by the irrational anger caused by the trade deficit. In fact, all mainstream economists believe that President Trump's theory, the relationship between the two countries should be based on a bilateral trade deficit, is erroneous in terms of analytic law. On the other hand, China has also violated some widely accepted trade and investment regulations. For example, China will subsidize exports, restrict imports, protect national leading enterprises, and force purchases of Chinese products. In some cases, foreign companies will be required to partners share their intellectual property. The problems presented by these structural policies are very complicated. They are rooted in China's economic model. The United States needs to realize that it cannot simply ask China to change this model. China also needs to realize that China's system will bring trade activities to the consequences that cannot be accepted by other countries. On this basis, the two countries should determine a reasonable solution. Washington should focus on multilateral diplomacy and be patient. The United States should form an alliance with Brazil, Mexico, Japan, and the European Union. The United States and China have joined forces in economic and political terms. In the 1990s, when I was the U.S. Treasury Secretary, the United States and China worked together to stop the Asian financial crisis. Although the Trump administration has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement, U.S.-China bilateral cooperation is indispensable for the creation of the agreement in 2015. We must cross the headlines about U.S.-China trade and see the consequences of the growing friction between the two countries. For the future welfare of mankind, the two countries should not focus on the immediate economic interests, but must see that constructive cooperation can be mutually beneficial and act accordingly.